Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. There are getting to be signs of spring. Over the winter, we received many questions from viewers trying to get ready for a successful garden this year. Today, we're answering some of those questions. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Joel Diamond. Joel Ellen is the Director of Landscape at the University of Memphis, and Mike Dennison is with us today. Mr. D is a retired UT Extension agent. Thank you all for joining us.
Good to be here.
All right, so y'all ready? These are great questions.
Oh yeah,
We're ready.
Let's get them.
All right, let's get them.
Yeah.
Let's get them. All right, so here's our first viewer email. How do I get rid of cucumber beetles? Do they overwinter in the soil? And this is Doris from Mainville, Ohio. So, Mr. D, how do you get rid of those cucumber beetles?
You probably don't, and no, they don't overwinter in the soil. They do spend a small portion of their life cycle, maybe a couple of weeks in the soil, but they overwinter as adults. Most of them, I think, are pregnant female adults, and they survive the winter ready to lay eggs. They overwinter in debris and other plants.
Yeah, I mean, I can see her cleaning up her garden, thinking that she's, got rid of the cucumber beetles for the year. There's nothing for them to overwinter in, but in the corner of the yard might be a pile of leaves or some debris, or the neighbors have some, or the woods that she's next to. Or they're everywhere. You can't get rid of all of them. They're always going to be there, unfortunately.
So definitely have to practice good sanitation. So, all right, will she need to change the soil out in her raised bed?
It's not going to, because they spend such a small portion of their time during the growing season in the soil, probably not going to help at all. You can tolerate some damage. The adults, of course, chew on the leaves mostly. They feed on the leaves. The larvae, when they're in the ground, they'll feed on the roots to some extent. And that can create problems, in some agricultural situations. And it's just it's a tough situation. There are some insecticides that you can use to treat when they're there, but the problem is with a lot of insects, if you kill all of them on your property or on your plants, get a good strong wind from out of the south, and you've got more. And these insects are strong flyers. They don't have to fly on the wind currents, but they're going to be looking for food that they like, and it's a tough situation.
It is a tough situation. She did mention that she sets traps, and they keep coming back.
Well, that's going to contract them. I wouldn't do that either.
Well, the trap is got a pheromone in it that attracts them and brings them in.
And I don't know.
And you're not going to catch all of them. Some going to be left behind.
No, resistant varieties is another thing to think about.
Something to think
too.
about. There you are. All right. So, Ms. Doris, we hope that helps you out. Good luck with that. All right, here's our next viewer email. How do I get my 2 Honeycrisp apple trees to bear fruit? The trees are 7 years old, and this is Ken from Wisconsin. All right, so Mr. D, you like those old Honeycrisp apples, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
How do you do?
Most excellent apple. I hope that Ken has pollinators because Honeycrisp require cross-pollination. The trees are 7 years old. They ought to be blooming now. A dwarf or semi-dwarf apple tree takes 3 to 5 years to bloom, and a standard rootstock takes from 5 to 10 years. So no matter what kind of rootstock they're on, they ought to be blooming now. I know that crab apple will cross-pollinate. Gala, Macintosh, Fuji, Golden Delicious, Red Delicious, Pink Lady, they will all cross-pollinate. But if he doesn't have a pollinator planted, the problem is it's going to be 3 to 5 years before a pollinator will be blooming. So, I guess I have a few questions. I don't know.
Well, he did say 2 Honeycrisp apple trees, so would you need a different variety, 1 Honeycrisp and maybe?
Yeah, 2 Honeycrisp apple trees will not pollinate each
Right.
other. There has to be another variety.
right.
It's cross-pollination of varieties.
Right.
So you just got double trouble if you
Yeah.
have 2 trees with no pollinator.
Okay.
You know, no cross-pollination.
Right. And he did mention, of course, that the trees are healthy, full of lots of foliage, but yeah, it'd be good to.
Yeah, if
One
there's
Honeycrisp
no
and then another
pollinator,
variety.
if
Right.
there's no pollinator around, one thing, a crabapple will bloom a lot quicker probably than one of these apples. So if
Yeah.
he doesn't have a pollinator, you may want to plant a crabapple and try to get some pollination going there.
Right.
I mean, everything, make sure your soil conditions are right, soil test, and if the tree is healthy, that's the only thing I can think of.
All right. Well, Ken, we hope that helps you out there. We thank you for that question. All right, here's our next via email. When should I start planting my garden? And this is Peter from Maryland. So what do you think about that one, Joella?
Oh, yeah. Well, when you're thinking of when to start your garden, no matter what part of the country you're in, you've got to look at what zone you're in and then the frost dates for that zone. Maryland is very interesting because it has zone 6A to 8A, which is a large category
It
of
is.
zones to
Right.
be in. So I don't know which one he is in, but the majority of the state is in 7A and 7B. Frost dates for those areas are May 1st to the 10th or April 21st through the 30th. So whichever zone he is in, he needs to look to follow the directions of when the last frost date is. And you can look on the seed packets too. The back of the seed packets all tell when the best time for your zone is to plant. Look at that. That's the best way that I can tell you to find out how to look when it is the time to plant.
I think that would help.
And I think local nurseries, you can go to your extension office there and ask them. You can go to the garden center and see what's there have out, because a lot of places aren't going to start selling things that it's not even really close to the time to plant in your area.
All right. Anything you want to add to that, Mr. Day?
I just say now, you can garden year round.
Right.
Unless you want to take a winter rest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The warm season ones, you definitely need to wait till after frost, well after frost.
Right.
Don't push it unless you're ready to replant.
Yeah, unless you're ready to buy more
If you
plants.
push it, and,
That's
and
right.
keep in mind
That's
that
right.
average frost-free date is the average frost-free date. And like ours is April 15th, but we may get a frost on the 20th.
Yep.
And we may very well, our last date may be the 5th.
Right.
So it's a, but you need to know, when that frost-free date is.
I think that'll help Peter out. Yeah, University of Maryland Extension.
Yes.
They'll have those publications
They
for you.
sure will.
All right, they're good. All right, here's our next via email. How do I get consistent blooms and good fruit from pear trees every year? And this is Dennis. So what do you think about that, Mr. D?
I wish I knew how to do that. I've got pear trees, and some years I do good, and some years I don't do very well. There have been cases where I've had a late freeze that has taken out my small fruit. The bloom already past bloom, and temperatures get below 28 degrees, it takes it out, and I have no control over that.
Yeah.
I would work very hard on the things that I have control over. I would make sure that my pH is right. I'd make sure that I apply the fertilizer that I need to apply. And pear trees don't require a lot of fertilizer at all. I would make sure that I control fire blight.
Yeah.
That's normally
that's
a
a good
problem on
one.
some pears.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I apply cover sprays when I need to, go with the dormant sprays when you need to. And then if Mother Nature smiles upon
all
you,
of that.
dry conditions tend to increase the sugar content in fruit. So overwatering can affect the taste of fruit, and strawberries and peaches and plums and pears.
So with that being said, so some years the fruit is red colored and delicious, and other years green and bitter. So what do you think would cause that?
Even if he's not irrigating it or watering it, Mother Nature might be watering it more some years than the other years.
Yeah, and I know with pears, you don't want to eat them until they're ripe.
Right.
And that means sometimes you pick them and you let
yeah.
them sit for a day or two before you eat them. And so the time of harvest could have something to do with that.
Right. Well, they're red in color. They're delicious. So just hope for the
Yeah,
red color
so
ones.
enjoy 'em
And,
that
yeah,
year.
eat those. And
And hopefully, the years that they're good, you can get some
Yeah.
of them, and the squirrels won't get
Right,
them all like
right,
they did
right.
for mine last year.
Right.
And if the years that they're green and bitter, the squirrels can have them.
Yeah,
You know?
that's the squirrels have them. There you go, Dennis. How about that? Yeah, we thank you for that question.
Yeah.
All right, here's our next via email. What kind of soil do I need for my new raised bed garden? And this is Joanne from Hayworth, Illinois. So what do you think about that one, Joella?
Well, most raised beds, a lot of people think that they should just put all organic matter in it, but the actual soil that exists around anybody's raised bed is good for plants. In fact, it has a lot of micronutrients and properties that organic, bagged soil does not have. So I always, even when I put my own raised beds, I get soil that's existing and I mix it with some organic matter and then put that in the raised bed
And
to
it works just
get a
fine,
little
okay.
bit of combination of both, and it seems to work out really well.
Works well. All right, so Joanne is from Hayworth, Illinois. So
Ah.
what do you say about
Well, you know,
Illinois, since you know a little bit about Illinois,
yes,
right?
from Illinois has got some of the nicest topsoil around, and it's organic, and it's a nice dark, rich color that it can go down 4 feet. So, I mean, when I lived there, we never had potting soil because we just went out in the dirt and used that as potting soil. She has some of the best. I would love to have that in my raised beds. And she may not have to add much to it, but I would, whatever of the soil she puts in there, I would take a pH test just to make sure if it needs any fertilizer, and maybe it just needs nitrogen, or it's got plenty of potassium or phosphorus, and she doesn't need any of that. But she won't know until she does the soil test.
All right, it's Joanne. There you have it. From Miss Illinois herself, right? 4 feet. All right, thank you for that question.
Nice stuff.
All right, here's our next via email. How do I overwinter a gardenia plant in the house? And this is Pan from Spokane, Washington.
Well, yeah, my parents used to do that all the time, but they did not put it in the house. So they only drug theirs into the garage and made a little space for it next to the house. They would stay warmer and put some plastic around it.
Okay.
But in the house, it's going to be a kind of a dry environment. Don't overwater it.
Yes.
It's still going to lose leaves because it's used to being outside. Don't fertilize it. You don't want to encourage
point.
growth. You're just going to try to keep it alive and even until you can take it back outside again.
Right, so humidity is going to be important.
Humidity
Water is
is-
going to be
yeah.
important. So we're trying to overwinter it. So
Yes.
should it be closer to the window? Because she mentioned that she has it close to the window.
If it can, especially because it's warm. That's why in the garage it didn't matter. We didn't
Right.
put it near a window in the garage because we're kind of just keeping it alive till the next season. But in the house, it's warm, so it's wanting to grow. So you're going to have to water. It's going to dry out more. That you're going to have to water because you still water the ones in the garage, but very, very little because it's so cool in the garage.
Right.
But in the house, it's going to be warmer. She's going to have to water. But she will lose leaves because it's not the same intensity of sunlight, even coming through a window,
Right.
as it would be outside.
Right.
So
Especially in the
don't be
winter.
afraid of that. But then also don't overwater it. I would keep it, let it dry out between the waterings, just so it doesn't get too much water,
Okay.
because it won't be using it as much.
All right. So there you have it. Ms. Pan, thank you much. Good luck with that. Okay, here's our next via email. When starting seeds, should you water from the bottom? And this is Katie from Des Moines, Iowa. So what do you think about that, Mr. D?
I don't think so. I think you should water from the top. And the reason that I say that is it's easier to determine how damp it is if you water from the top. If you water from the bottom, if you feels damp on top, it's pretty saturated down below that, and And I think that could create some problems with Phytophthora or Pythium or, some of the diseases, soil-borne diseases. So I think you need to water from the top.
What do you think about that,
Yeah.
Joel?
Either way, but what I'm concerned with watering from the bottom is the top may still be dry, and if that's where if you have small seeds and that's where they are, they're never going to get enough moisture to germinate, which is why I usually make sure that the soil that I'm working with is wet first
Okay.
before I plant anything in it.
Gotcha.
And then after I plant it, I may mist it or get it wet. Then I put it in a mini greenhouse setting by putting a big clear plastic bag over it to mimic a greenhouse if you don't have all the little forms you can buy. And that keeps the soil more even for the germination of the plants inside.
So when you're watering over top, and we're talking about starting seeds, right? How would you water so you don't displace the seeds?
Well, you got to have misters. You have to
Okay.
mist. You can't. That's why I like to start with moist seed first.
That makes sense to
It's a
me.
lot easier, and if it's really small seeds, the whole seed's moist. You put the greenhouse plastic over it, it stays
It's your
moist,
greenhouse, yep.
and you don't have to water it as often and not as much.
I'm with that. Okay. All right, Katie, I hope that helps you out. Yeah, that's good. All right. Here's our next via email. Do I need to sterilize the ground to get rid of rose rust from a previous plant? And this is Barbara from Los Angeles, California. So what do you think about that one, Joel?
Ooh, rose rust is horrible, and it is everywhere. And it sounds like she's tried and tried to get rid of it.
Yeah, she's tried, she tried to cure an old bush but had to pull it out. So she tried.
Well, it does get in the soil if you've left leaves. And you need to take, like every year when the leaves fall off of it, you need to take them up because they have the rust spores on them that can get in the soil. I mean, she could, but I mean, the thing is, she lives in California.
Los Angeles, California.
And if you have the same problem, it doesn't matter where you are, the rust does not like hot, dry weather. So even if you don't plant it right away, if you let it go in the summertime when it's hot out, it will be killed in the soil anyway, and then plant after that.
So it's tough. What you think, Mr. D?
Rust, all of the rust diseases that I know of are transmitted by spores
Yes.
that could be released from the ground, or mostly from leaves and debris and infected tissue. And so they're transported by air or by water that's splashed or by you handling them.
That's a good point.
So I don't think they're not taken up by the roots. So I don't see any benefit in sterilizing the soil.
Yeah, gotcha.
And I'm not sure that there's anything legal that you can sterilize the soil with in California.
Yeah.
But like you said, sanitation, clean up
and
the
time.
leaves and then go with fungicides or resistant varieties. But fungicides, timely fungicide usage is the only thing that I can think of.
To prevent it, yeah. I mean, if you plant it right away, you just, make sure you get all the debris up around it. And once you've planted it, you maybe need to preventatively spray it with fungicides. That's what fungicides are for. They're to prevent.
To prevent the disease, yeah. Fungicides are preventative in nature.
Yeah, and we are talking about roses, so you definitely gonna have to put them on the
Yeah.
spray schedule for the most part, Ms. Barbara. So
Yep.
there you have it. Practice good sanitation. I definitely do agree with that, for sure. All right, good luck to you. All right, here's our next viewer email. It's interesting. Do some flowers struggle to bloom in rich, fertilized soils? This is Jack from Rochester, New York. So, Mr. David, what do you think about that one?
Probably because, there's some plants do well in areas that are rocky and the soils aren't well, and those, if you put those in a rich fertile soil, it might just get 10 feet tall and or just grow a lot of leaves and vegetative rather than blooming. I can remember when I was growing up, we always planted peas in the summertime, and you wanted to plant them on the side of a hill where it wasn't very rich and in some poorer soil, and the peas would tend to produce peas and not a lot of leaves. And if you planted them in the real rich land where you grew your corn and the bottom land and all that, you'd have these big tall plants that were covered with leaves and not many peas. So it's that same
Same.
analogy.
Right.
So yes, some plants are adapted to.
Yeah, some plants
and
will,
Some
yeah.
plants need that kind of soil. Some plants don't necessarily need all that.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say it just really depends on the plant
Right.
Yeah.
and what it needs for its own environment to do well.
Right. So does too much fertilizer just promote green growth?
Oh yes, definitely.
So it definitely does that?
Yeah.
Okay. So what about the coneflowers and black-eyed Susans? What kind of soils do they prefer?
They like well drained and think about it. Those are wildflowers out on the prairie.
Yeah.
Are those in rich soils? No. So they prefer not to be in rich soils.
Right.
And they would do better in just a plain old soil, just nothing special, and dry. They like it on the dry
well,
side.
yeah.
Yeah.
It goes something to say about when you see plants in their natural habitat. That should give you an idea what they prefer.
That's right.
Yeah, that's good. So appreciate that question, Mr. Jack. All right, here's our next via email. Can I save 2 pear trees that have not been pruned for 15 years? And this is Kay. So can she do that, Mr. D? Haven't been pruned in 15 years.
It sounds to me like they've saved themselves. No, they probably you can get out there and you can take the water sprouts off and you can try to take out some of the competing central leaders so that you've got one or smaller number than the ones you have.
Yeah.
But severe pruning will encourage more water sprout development. But I would still do it. I'd get out there and I'd go to work on them, and I'd take the water sprouts out, and I would thin it out some, because that will help, reduce disease pressure if you allow it to dry out, have air circulation, and so I would be one to get out there and I'd give it a go. And if they've gone 15 years without being pruned, they're pretty tough. They're pretty tough critters. They're probably big.
Yeah, probably pretty big.
You probably need a chainsaw.
Can you prune too much? Is that something that can happen with your pear tree?
Only if you do what I call severe renewal pruning, probably, and you cut it off even with the ground. That is too much.
Yeah, that's too much.
That's too much. But probably not, as far as a tree like this that's got a heck of a root system.
Yeah.
It's got a heck of a root system to support all that above ground growth that it's got. If you
that's
take
good.
off,
That's a good point.
if you take off 30%, 50% of that above ground growth, you're going to get a flush of growth though. You're going to get a flush of growth, and a lot of it's going to be water sprouts, and you might want to consider going out there and following up, and when the water sprouts are that big, instead of
when they get
12
big.
feet tall, snapping them off, put a glove on and snap them off, and try to kind of manage that a little bit. But if you do that, if you do some pruning, and then if you do some fruit thinning, before the fruit gets too big, you should have some good fruit on there.
That is
And
for sure.
I have seen trees like that. I actually have. I've seen them, and I've attacked them before.
He's
and
attacked them before.
They do tend to survive.
All right, Ms. Kay, hope that helps you out. Yeah, Mr. D said, get at them. Get them. All right, here's our next via email. How do I keep my raised bed vegetable garden productive? I've had declining success each year. And this is Jim from Highland, Illinois. So what do you think about that one?
Well,
Joellen? Yeah?
Well, has he taken a pH test of the soil? I mean, it might be lacking a nutrient. I've had some raised beds and they weren't doing well, and I'm like, well, what's going on? Well, when I did a soil test on it, they lacked nitrogen, and only nitrogen. So I put a little more nitrogen on them, and then they did better. So he just needs to make sure he's doing that. And I don't know what he's planting in there, but
Well, he's growing cucumber, squash, and cantaloupe.
and tomatoes. Well, then hopefully he's not taking and putting them in the same spot in his raised bed, because he needs to rotate the crops, even in a small bed. You can, if the first year he's got 4
Yeah, it's 4.
vegetables.
With the tomatoes, yeah.
rotate one this year, here, here, and here, and then the next year switch it up, and then every year put all the vegetables in a different spot, because you can do that in the same raised bed. There was room for it all to grow there in the first place. They can all grow in different spots every year.
Okay.
And that would help too. But I would definitely want to know what the pH is, and it may just be lacking nitrogen. And of course, sometimes people with raised beds, when you pull your vegetables out, it takes up some of the soil. He might need to keep adding some more organic matter to his soil to keep it all up at the right level for the plants to grow also.
Yeah, that's what I would do, Mr. D. So when I'm harvesting, or when I finish harvesting, guess what I'll come back with? Organic matter. Yeah, so maybe leaf mold, compost, yeah, and let it go to sleep over the winter with that. And it'll break down and it'll add to the soil structure. That's what I would do. What do you think?
Nope. What you said first, though,
Yeah.
don't guess soil test. Get a soil test. That sounds to me like something may be wrong there, and it could be the rotation.
Yeah, definitely.
It could be a nutrient deficiency that could very easily be solved.
Okay. All right, Mr. Jim, we hope that helps you out. We hope you have great success moving forward. All right, so Joellen, Mr. D, we're out of time. That was fun.
It was.
That was good.
Good.
Thank you much. Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is questions@familyplotgarden.com. And the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee, 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. Thanks for watching. At familyplotgarden.com, we have more information about each question we answered. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.